It's time for Fresh Oil with singer-songwriter and pastor Keith Manley, a program designed to minister the gospel of God's grace and to bring fresh oil to the brokenhearted. And now, with today's program, Pastor Keith Manley.
Welcome to Fresh Oil. I'm Keith Manley, and I am so glad you joined me today because this week I want to take you on a journey through 5 of the most extraordinary moments in the gospel accounts. And the thread that runs through every one of them is the same: the hands of Jesus. We're calling this series, The Things Jesus Touched. And I want you to think about that for a moment before we dive in. Jesus, the Son of the living God, the one through whom all things were made, the one in whom all the fullness of the Godhead dwells bodily, had hands, real hands, carpenter's hands, callous from years of working wood in Joseph's shop in Nazareth, human hands that got dirty and tired and cold, and those hands reached out and touched things. And everything those hands touched changed. This week, I want to look at 5 things Jesus touched: a leper, a coffin, a blind man's eyes, a sick woman's hand, and something that nobody would have expected him to touch: the severed ear of a man who came to arrest him. 5 touches, 5 transformations, and I believe that by Friday, you are going to understand something about the hands of Jesus that will change the way you read your own story. Because here is what I want you to walk away with this week: whatever Jesus touches changes. That is the rule. That is the pattern. It has never failed. And if you will let Him put His hands on the thing in your life that seems most beyond help, most broken, most untouchable, the rule still applies. Today we start with a leper. Matthew chapter 8. Jesus has just come down from the Sermon on the Mount. Great crowds are following Him. And out of nowhere, out of the crowd, out of the margin, out of the place where nobody expected Him to be, a leper comes and kneels before Him. Now I need to stop right there and make sure you feel the weight of this moment. Because in the first century world, what just happened was absolutely scandalous. A leper did not approach a crowd. A leper did not come near people. The Mosaic Law, Leviticus 13, was explicit and detailed and non-negotiable. A person with leprosy was ceremonially unclean. They were required to tear their clothes, leave their hair disheveled, cover their upper lip, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean," wherever they went. They were required to live outside the camp, outside the city, separated from their family, their community, their synagogue, their everything. Leprosy in the ancient world was not just a physical disease. It was a total social death. You lost your name. You were just the leper. You lost your family. You could not touch your wife, hold your children, embrace your parents. You lost your community. No synagogue, no feast days, no Passover table with the people you loved. You lost your dignity. You had to announce your own contamination everywhere you went. Every person who saw you coming stepped back, stepped away, gave you the widest possible berth. And this man, this unnamed, marginalized, legally unclean, socially dead human being, comes and kneels before Jesus and says, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." I want you to sit with that sentence for a minute. If you are willing. He does not doubt the power of Jesus. He has heard enough to know that Jesus can do this. What he doubts is whether Jesus would want to. Whether someone like him, untouchable, unclean, pushed to the edges of everything, was the kind of person Jesus would be willing to help. He comes with his miracle already in one hand and his uncertainty in the other. And I want to tell you, I have met that man in my 50 years of ministry. Not a leper, but someone sitting across from me in my office who says, "Pastor, I know God can. I just don't know if God would for someone like me." And Jesus answers him. And the answer has two parts, and both parts matter. First, I am willing. In the Greek, thelo, I will it, I desire it, I choose it. This is not reluctant compliance. This is not Jesus sighing and deciding he supposes he should help the leper since he is here anyway. This is an expression of active desire. I want to do this. I am willing. I choose this. Before the healing comes the willingness. Before the touch comes the declaration. Jesus looks at the man that everybody else looked away from and says, "I want to help you. You came wondering if I would be willing. Let me answer that before I do anything else. I am willing." And here is the first teaching point I want to leave with you today. Jesus is never reluctant to heal what is broken. He does not have to be talked into it. He does not have to be convinced that your situation is worth his time and attention. The willingness is already there. The question is never whether Jesus is willing. The question is whether we will come to him the way this leper came, broken, honest, kneeling, and asking. And then the second part of the answer. And this is where the story goes from beautiful to staggering. And he reached out his hand and touched him. He touched him. Do you know how long it had been since anyone had touched that man? We don't know his full story. We don't know if he had a wife, children, a mother who used to hold his face in her hands. We don't know how long he had been a leper, but we know this. However long it had been, however many days and weeks and months and years had passed since any human being had laid a hand on him in kindness, it ended in this moment. Jesus reached out and touched him. Now I need you to understand something about what Jesus just did from a legal and religious standpoint. According to the law, touching a leper made you unclean. It transferred the contamination to you. Any rabbi, any Pharisee, any religiously serious Jewish person watching this scene would have been horrified. You do not touch a leper. You do not get close enough to touch a leper. You certainly do not reach out your hand and make deliberate, intentional, physical contact with a leper. And Jesus did it anyway. But here is the theology I want you to grab, and this is the heart of the whole program today. When Jesus touched the leper, the contamination did not flow from the leper to Jesus. The cleanness flowed from Jesus to the leper. The uncleanness did not win. The holiness won. The disease did not infect the healer. The healer healed the disease. This is the second teaching point, and I want you to write it down if you are somewhere you can write. In the presence of Jesus, holiness is more contagious than sin. The contamination always flows the other direction when Jesus is involved. And this is not just true in this story. This is the entire theology of the incarnation in miniature. When the Son of God stepped into the contaminated, broken, sin-soaked condition of human existence, he did not become contaminated. He brought cleansing into a contaminated world. He went to the leper colony of fallen humanity and touched it. And the touching did not make him unclean. It made us clean. The cross is the ultimate expression of this. Jesus took on himself the full weight of human sin, was made sin for us, Paul says, and the sin did not win. He did not stay dead. He did not stay in the tomb. On the third day, the holiness of God overpowered the contamination of sin and death, and Jesus walked out of that grave as clean and glorious and victorious as the day he entered Bethlehem. Holiness is always more contagious than sin when Jesus is in the room. I read years ago about a physician in the early days of AIDS research, when very little was known about the disease and fear was running at a fever pitch. Hospitals were struggling with how to care for patients that nobody wanted to go near. And this doctor, a believer, a man of deep faith, made a decision that his colleagues thought was reckless. He decided he would not treat his AIDS patients from a clinical distance. He would touch them. He would hold their hands. He would sit on the edge of their beds. He would be physically present with them in a way that communicated, "You are not untouchable to me." And he said in an interview years later, he said, "Every time I walked into one of those rooms, I thought about Jesus and the leper. Jesus could have healed him from across the street. He had done miracles at a distance before. He didn't have to touch him, but he did. And I think he touched him because the man needed to be touched just as much as he needed to be healed." That stopped me cold when I read it. The man needed to be touched just as much as he needed to be healed. Because here is the thing about leprosy. The physical disease was terrible, but the isolation, the loneliness, the years of being the person nobody would come near, that was its own kind of death. And Jesus addressed both with one gesture. He healed the body with the word, "Be cleansed," but he healed the soul with the touch. Before the word came, the hand reached out. And that is the third teaching point I want to leave with you. Sometimes Jesus touches before he speaks. The touch came first. The healing word came after. And I believe that is intentional, because there are wounds in a human soul that need to know they are not untouchable before they can receive the miracle. If you have spent years feeling like the person nobody comes near, the person with the messy marriage, the addiction, the past that people know about, the failure that followed you out of that church and into the next one, I want you to hear this. Jesus does not heal you from across the street. He does not throw the miracle in your direction from a comfortable distance. He reaches out his hand. He closes the gap. He touches you before he says a word. And when he touches, the contamination flows the other way. Whatever he touches changes. Let me close today with this. Is there something in your life that feels leprous? Something you have been carrying that has isolated you, that has made you feel like you are standing outside the camp, calling out your own failures? Something that makes you wonder, not whether God can, but whether God would, for someone like you. He is willing. That is always the first answer. Before the touch, before the word, before the healing, he is willing. And then he reaches out his hand, and the rule always applies. Whatever Jesus touches changes. Father, for everyone listening today who has felt untouchable, reach out your hand, close the gap, touch what has been avoided and isolated and covered up, and let the cleansing flow.
Thanks for joining us today for Fresh Oil with Pastor Keith Manley. Fresh Oil is an outreach of Grace Family Church in Rockford, Illinois, and can be heard each weekday at this same time. You can reach us online at weneedgod.com. Until next time, remember, God's love for you is unconditional, and He makes His mercies new every morning.